Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I'm Lauren from Guthrie and Ganny, and in this video I wanted to chat to you about all the different types of tapes and interfacing tapes that we stock here in my shop, Guthrie and Ganny, and explain to you what they are and what you use them for, and just give you some examples and demonstrations of how you can use them in your sewing and dressmaking projects. So I have made a blog post that goes along with this video. I'll pop a link to that in the description, and that is the best way to see some notes and a summary of what I've said and get links to where you can buy all of the tapes and the products that I'm going to mention as well. I'll also put timestamp chapters on this video, so if you hover along the time bar then you'll see the different timings of when I talk about the different ones. I've got 6 altogether to talk to you about. So we've got forming tape interfacing, edge tape interfacing, seam tape interfacing, wonder tape, Framilastic and stretchfix. So all of these things are really good for a variety of different scenarios in sewing and dressmaking. So hopefully it will give you some ideas and maybe let you know about some things that you haven't realised that you could do before that make the whole sewing process and dressmaking process a little bit easier. So the first one that I wanted to cover, which I think is possibly my favourite, is the prim forming tape interfacing. So this comes in a white and an anthracite, or like a dark grey colour. So it's 12 millimetres wide, it is 100% polyester, so it comes in these packs that are 5 metres long. And rather than it being non-woven, it's got threads that are cut, that run diagonally, so it's like it's cut on the bias. And it's got this stitch, this sort of chain stitch stitched through it, which when you put tension on it, it feels quite firm, like it doesn't really give at all. And because it is cut on the bias, it's really easy to manipulate it and move it around curves of necklines and armholes and that sort of thing. It's very lightweight and floppy and soft, so once you apply it onto your fabric, it doesn't really add any extra bulk or thickness or stiffness at all, but it does help to stabilize it. When you do feel it, you'll notice that one side is rough and the other is a little bit more smooth. So the rough side has glue on it, and that glue gets activated by the heat from your iron. So you iron it onto your fabric and then the glue melts and then it bonds permanently onto your fabric, ready to stabilize it. So I find that it is really, really good for stabilizing, especially lightweight, quite slippery fabrics. So things like viscose or rayon or modal. It's really good for replacing the stage that you might see in sewing instructions sometimes where it says to stay stitch the neckline. So this is when you do a line of stitching on the neckline. Sometimes you do it on armholes as well, or it might be pocket openings where they're sort of cut at the diagonal to the grain line of the fabric. And the reason you do it is to stop the fabric from becoming misshapen or stretched out of shape or distorted at all as you sew and work with it. But especially on lightweight fabrics, it can be quite tricky to do that. And because you have to do it quite close to the raw edge, sometimes the machine can sort of just eat the fabric a little bit, and it can kind of cause the fabric to fray a little bit more as you do that. Whereas the forming tape interfacing, you just iron it onto the wrong or the back or reverse side of your fabric and line it up with the raw edge. You press it on, it stabilizes that neckline, it stops it from stretching out, it doesn't change the sort of texture or the weight or thickness of your fabric at all, and then you can totally skip that stay stitching step, because when as you can see, when you put tension on that chain stitch through the forming tape, it doesn't give, so it's holding that curved shape of the fabric in place. The next one is edge tape interfacing. Now this tape comes in a pack with 10 metres on it. It is 20 millimetres wide or 2 centimetres, and it's reinforced by vertical threads, which you can see here. It's made from 100% polyamide, and it probably does have a bit of a sort of thicker weight or texture to it than the forming tape does. It's also heat activated, so one side is soft, one side is rough where the glue is, and when that glue melts, it sticks to the back of your fabric. Now, it is a little bit more rigid, so it doesn't really kind of mold round curves as much. It's going to be a bit better for like straighter edges, so people use it on things like front edges or lapels or pocket openings. if you did want to use it around a curve, you'd have to sort of clip into it a little bit to ease some tension there so that you could then kind of mould it round. But as with the forming tape interfacing, you're just using a cool to medium setting on your iron. Maybe you need to use a pressing cloth as well, depending on what other fabric you're using it with. And then just use the iron, the heat from the iron to activate that glue. You can wait till it cools and then you can check that it's properly bonded just by sort of trying to pick away at it. If it comes away quite easily, the iron's not been hot enough. You just need to go over it again and get it to stick down properly, so that when you do come to try and take it off, it shouldn't really do that. It should just be stuck onto the fabric. The next one is seam tape interfacing. So this comes in packs of 10 meters. So you get a bit more on this one, and it is just 10 millimeters or a centimeter wide. So it's a bit narrower than the edge tape interfacing. It is made from 50% viscose and 50% cellulose. And again, it's got that heat activated glue in the back. So one side's rough, one side's smooth. The rough side's got the glue. When you put that onto the wrong side of your fabric and heat it up with the iron, glue melts and it sticks to it. Now, this also doesn't really go around corners that easily, and you can see from the packet there it's showing that if you did want it to go around a corner, you just have to snip into it a little bit to get it to lay flat. So you can use it in, around curves if you wanted to. What it quite commonly gets used for is if you're making a garment for a t-shirt or using stretchy fabric, the instructions might tell you to sew a bit of ribbon or some tape into the seam at the shoulder seam just to stop it stretching out. Not all of them do, but some of them do. And an alternative to doing that can be just to iron this onto the back of your fabric at the shoulder seam to help stabilize it, and it'll stop that shoulder seam from stretching out. It'll mean that it can't stretch at all, so it does give it some rigidity in that sense. It won't have any give because this doesn't have any stretch in it. And depending on what your seam allowance is, you might have to position it a certain distance away from the raw edge of the fabric so that when you actually sew the seam, you're sewing through this as well. But you can also use it on pocket openings as well. I would say it probably feels a little bit lighter weight than the edge tape interfacing, and obviously it's narrower as well. So it just depends on what your application is and maybe what your seam allowance is and the fabric that you're using as to what would be the best type of tape for the specific project that you're using in. But the headline is that it's just going to help to stabilize the edge, the opening. It might be where a zip goes in, for example. It's just going to give it some extra sturdiness and stability and give a little bit more control to the fabric. The next one is Wonder Tape. I absolutely love this stuff as well. So this comes on a 9-meter roll and it is 6 millimeters wide, so it is quite narrow. Now, this is basically a double-sided sticky tape, but it is specifically for fabrics and textiles. So it works in the same way that double-sided sticky tape you would use for paper or craft projects or whatever. It works in the same way that does as well. So it's, as you stick it down, it's got a little paper backing on it. When you peel that paper backing off, then the other side is sticky as well. Now, although it is sticky, I would say that it's probably not quite as sticky as proper double-sided tape, and it's easy to reposition it. It doesn't, it doesn't lose its stickiness right away, but it's also not so sticky that once you put it into place, you can't then change your mind and move it around a little bit. So it is something that is temporary. You would use it in place of pinning something or using tacking stitches. So my favourite use for it is probably when putting in a zip, because you are always holding the zip in place from the back of the fabric, but when you sew in a zip, you have to sew it from the front. So this just makes it really easy because you're basically just sticking the zip in place, and then you can really easily sew from the front of the project that you're making, and yeah, it makes the whole thing much quicker and easier. It can also be good for holding trims in place or basting pockets, patch pockets. It's also good for fabrics where it's quite hard to pin them. I've used it on quite a thick soft shell fabric before to hold a pocket in place so that I could top stitch it on. Basically for any use where you would normally pin something but you don't want to pin it. I wouldn't suggest you do like the whole side seam of a dress or anything like that, but yeah, things like zips, pockets, little openings, trims, that kind of piping, that sort of thing. It's really just makes it really quick and easy, just takes the pinning and tacking stage out of it. And then the last two things that I wanted to talk to you about are a bit more specific to stretchy or jersey fabric. So the first one is Framilastic, and this comes in two different widths here. So we've got two packs. You get 5 meters in each pack. One is 6 millimeters wide, so that's the T6, and then one is 9 millimeters wide, so that is the T9. So this is a clear elastic, so it does stretch. It's got a very good recovery, so when you stretch it and let it go, it snaps back to the same length that it was before. It will always sort of do that. So it's really good for stabilizing shoulder seams on stretchy garments, so it will still allow the seam to stretch, but it will sort of stabilize it and support it as well, so it doesn't become overstretched over time. I have also seen it used on the neckline of wrap dresses as well, just so that they don't sort of bag out. So you're just kind of sewing it within the seam allowance there. Again, depending on what width you've got and what your seam allowance is, you're going to have to position it as a certain distance from the raw edge of your fabric, so that when you do sew the seam, you're sewing through the elastic as well. Now, I find that when you start off sewing this on a seam, it's really common for the machine to get stuck on the spot. So quite often what I'll do is have a little bit of extra elastic poking out the back of the foot on my sewing machine, so that I can kind of hold on to that, or I can just use that to kind of pull it through and help get it going. Once you're actually stitching, it's fine, but sometimes just starting off can be a little bit tricky. So if you are using it on shoulder seams, you need to make sure that as you sew, the elastic is totally relaxed, it's not stretched at all, otherwise your seam will end up with gathers or sort of tucks in it. So the elastic is relaxed and the fabric is relaxed too. And then you can also use Framilastic to add some detail or like a design feature to your garment as well. So it can be used to create ruffles or gathers in a garment. So for example, on the neckline of a jersey t-shirt top, classic example is the Tilling the Buttons Agnes t-shirt, which I have made lots and lots of times, and it's where you sew it into a certain part of the garment, but as you're sewing it, you stretch the elastic, so you kind of have to have, again, a little bit sort of poking out the back as you start. You pull it and you're keeping the fabric itself relaxed underneath, but the elastic is getting pulled taut. You sew it, and then when you let the elastic go, it then automatically gathers up that fabric and creates a little sort of ruching effect, which can look really nice. So it might be on like a sleeve head or as a neckline, as I said. There's a few different applications that you can use it for there. And then the last one that I wanted to show you is something called stretchfix. So this is something that we have been using a little bit more recently here at G&G. And again, it's specific for stretchy jersey fabric, and it's basically like a Bond-A-Web, if you've used that before. It's like a double-sided heat activated thing that you can use. It comes in two forms, so you can either buy it as a little pack that is 30 millimeters wide, so that's the T30, or you can buy it by the 10 centimeter as well, so it comes on rolls, and then you can just buy however much you want. We sell it by the 10 centimeters, so there's two different ways that you could buy it. It basically feels like paper, kind of looks like paper as well, but you feel that one side is like paper and then the other side is just like a little bit sort of tacky or rough, and that is the glue side. So it works in sort of two steps. So for example, if you were using it to do the hem on a t-shirt, a jersey t-shirt top, then you would cut the tape, or if you bought it by the meter, or the little tape itself, you would cut that to whatever the depth was of your hem, and you would iron that on to the bottom of your garment. So again, using a sort of cool to medium iron, you would just iron that on, and then once it is bonded onto the fabric, you peel off the backing paper, and then that leaves like the glue residue on the back of the fabric, and then you're just going to be folding that up and ironing it again, and that heat activates the sort of second stage of the glue, so then it's holding those two bits of fabric together. And then I would suggest stitching over the top of that. It would hold it, but I would say, in my experience, the chances are probably after a few washes it might start to come away. So I would say it's always good just to stitch it anyway, but it makes it much easier to stitch because suddenly the fabric's not rolling if you've got a very rolly, curly fabric. And it just gives it a little bit more sort of weight, and it's just easier for the machine to kind of stitch through it. And then because it's stretch fix, it stretches with the fabric. So, you know, it's fine to put in those stretchy jersey garments because it is still going to stretch. You might want to check it on a little scrap or kind of offcut of your project that you're making, just in case if you're making something where you really need the fabric to stretch a lot, if it's something very fitted and you need that fabric to still have a massive amount of stretch in it, I would just double check that the stretch fix is going to allow that, because although it does allow it to stretch, it's not like it's going to infinitely make it stretch. But in my experience, it's been really good. It makes it much easier to sew things like hems. We've used it on the straps of the True Bias Zoe tank top as well, which has binding that finishes off the neckline, and then the straps sort of finish off the armhole openings, and then the straps as well, and using the stretch fix on that makes it so much easier. It's much easier to control the fabric, and it just gives you a much neater, cleaner finish. So I hope you have found that interesting to hear about all those different types of things. Remember, you can check out the blog post if you want some notes on the things that I've chatted about, and all of the links to where you can buy all of these things as well. They're all available in my online shop. If you've got any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comments below, or you can contact the shop directly as well. You can call us or you can email us. I'll put our contact information in the description to the video as well. The G&G team and I are always more than happy to help. But thanks so much for watching. If you haven't subscribed to my channel already, remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on my next video, and I'll see you next time. Bye!